Hello. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in AML. I'm John Byrne, Chair of the AMLRS Advisory Board.
And I'm Elliot Berman, our Creative Director. We are excited to welcome you to the This Week in AML podcast,
where we explore key news and developments in the global financial crime prevention community.
Hi, John. How are you this week?
Hey, Elliot. I know we talked about this offline, but sadly, a couple of weeks ago when we did this, we had to mention our colleagues in Buffalo and how obviously everybody's suffering. And once again, it's happened again. And I'll let a lot more intelligent people talk about this, but I just want folks to know that we are also paying attention to the horrific things that occur in this country because of the lack of political will, and I'll just leave it that way. But bottom line is, we are just hoping for improvement. I'll just leave it that way.
Yeah, as you know, both of us are pretty good at having words, but it's really difficult, both for this particular event, but just the continued string of events, to really find words to adequately describe it, describe what happened, and to describe the frustration that we, as a nation, have not figured out how to fix it. So,
yeah, the best thing I would say is, if people haven't already watched, it's not very long. The coach of the Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr, before the last game they played a couple days ago, just watch his 3 or 4 minute set of comments. I'll just leave it that. It was just not just articulate, but so spot on. I think that's probably the best way to describe how most of us are feeling.
Yes, I agree with you.
Hey, so a couple things. We had several balls in the air this week to figure out what we wanted to talk about, but I wanted to go back to an issue that we've discussed many times, and obviously we've been involved in several projects over the past number of years, and that's the broad concept of de-risking. And I saw something this week that we've talked about a little bit offline, and that is a letter sent by the chairwoman of the Committee on Financial Services in the House, Maxine Waters, to the president, because there's a Summit of the Americas that's coming up in June, and she took the time in a letter to talk about her recommendation that there be a priority issue added to that if it wasn't already on the agenda, and that's financial access and inclusion. And we've both talked about how de-risking or lack of access has impacted humanitarian groups, but the focus of Chairwoman Waters' letter is the impact it's having in the Caribbean nations because of correspondent banking concerns. And I thought that's also a very important part of that. I know you saw that as well when she sent that this week.
I did, and I agree with you. I think one of the big things that it calls out is the fact that de-risking is an issue across many parts of our financial systems, and this part of the regional economy, these Caribbean and Central American nations are another element where organizations, financial service providers, certainly feel that the risk tolerance they have doesn't include them for a variety of reasons. Some of those have to do with sort of regulatory expectations or prior regulatory actions, not necessarily against that financial service provider, but just in the space.
Right. And several of the themes that are mentioned in the letter that caused this, besides what you just referenced, are well known to our community. So they call it an unfortunate mix of potential regulatory penalties, maturing AML laws, lingering, and they say often inaccurate negative perceptions, which I think is fair, and low bank profits. But I think one of the things that struck me as important to highlight, they mentioned the Atlantic Council report in March issues in the Caribbean, which I'll reference in a second. But part of the focus of the House committee that I thought was important to reference is um, providing technical assistance, supporting a consortium bank pilot project. I think that's a great idea. See how it works. Creating programs to encourage small and medium-sized banks to offer correspondent banking services, which would be something that I know some of our clients would be interested in learning about. And then here's what the focus for me: level setting U.S. and regional examiner understanding of AML enforcement. We can't emphasize that enough. While I hate the jargon of level setting, I understand the point that we've believed for a long time, our clients have believed for a long time, that one of the main drivers of de-risking is frankly the changing of regulatory expectations and not understanding what is acceptable risk mitigation. So I think referencing that is extremely important. And as I said, she also mentions in the letter a March report from the Atlantic Council. And if folks haven't had the chance to read that yet, it's on their website. It's entitled Financial De-risking in the Caribbean, the U.S. implications and what needs to be done. And there's a financial inclusion task force that is referenced in there. I would say that there's some also important recommendations in that report that you should take a look at. They also talk about some of the issues, and they also ask the Treasury to what they call work a mechanism that standardizes compliance requirements and has training components to that. And I think you connect that with working with examiners, you might have some potential improvements. At least that would seem to be a useful direction.
Yes, I think all of those things, raise up the point that rather than just continuing to de-risk, that that there are solutions, or at least things that can be done to manage the risk, open the area, the number of players in the space, by having banks that have not necessarily done correspondent banking in the past be involved, and of course the regulator issue would be. All of those are ways to manage this problem or to do something about it, as opposed to just make it bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and we know what happens when you de-risk in the humanitarian space, but I don't think there's as much understanding, and the report and what the committee is doing is focusing that understanding on correspondent bank impacts, because they talk about how it will impact obviously tourism, trade, things like improvements to water quality. I mean, there's so many things that if you don't have financial access for these institutions in that region, they're going to have difficulty in protecting against crime, all sorts of things where monies are so important. They reference remittances, how important that is to help the working class populations to access the US dollar. So there's a whole host of things. This is not new to you and me, but I think it's important that as we try to tackle inclusion and access, we look at clearly what we've been looking at, humanitarian and charities, but also understand the correspondent bank dilemma that's been going on. And I think I would imagine that this will be on the agenda for the summit. And obviously the banking committee has done quite a bit of work in this space.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll link in our posting on our website, we'll link to the Atlantic Council report, which is a worthy read, and also to Chairman Waters' letter. And it's a space we recommend people continue to pay attention to. For those of you who are at insured financial institutions, to the extent that when the regulators are in your institution for an examination or just a meeting, if he can get things like this on the agenda and do some education, which I know many of you have tried to do. If we can't get a level setting at sort of the examiner in the examiner agency level, maybe we can do it one by one.
That's right. Yeah, and I would just say going forward, Elliot, we obviously, as we're recording this afternoon, we have a webinar on sanctions that I know people are going to want to watch the recordings of. We're very excited about having our colleague Tim White moderate with two experts. We were able to post an interview I did with Jamal Al-Hindi, the former deputy director of FinCEN, who's now at Clifford Chance. I think you're going to find that compelling as well. And we have a number of other things in the pipeline coming up in the next few weeks.
Yes, and our June webinar will be June 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the live stream. And the topic is customer risk rating models. So I think that would be an interesting one as well. So everybody have a great, if you're in the U.S., long weekend. And John, I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Elliot. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.